Konnichiwa.
And howdy, y'all.
I'm Leslie.
And I'm Laurie, and welcome to Sumo Kaboom.
Kaboom, where we talk about all things sumo.
Yeah, and today we're going to be talking about hair. Hair. Why? Well, there's a few reasons. One is we've been receiving some questions about hair lately that we want to address. But
yeah, people are very curious about.
Yeah.
They're very curious about hair.
Yeah. The big reason is that when we got those 2022 sumo calendars in from Robert, a big sumo fan, we were looking at the last page and we were saying, oh, isn't this a wonderful calendar? There's gyoji on the top and there's collars in the middle. And then who are these guys on the bottom? And it took a while because we found out they were
no
floor
offense
mountains.
to them. They don't look like athletes. You know
No,
what I mean?
they don't. They're very different looking. And then we found out they were floor mountains, and that didn't help either. We were like, who is a
floor mountain? Do they set up the dojo? Who are these guys? And I feel so bad for not knowing or not recognizing them. They're such a huge part of the sumo world.
Well, obviously they're in the calendar. So they're a big part of the sumo world. So we figured, okay, we need to look more into these floor mountains. And what that means is hairdressers. Floor mountains are hairdressers. They're called Tokoyama. So that's what we're going to dive into today.
So how about we talk a little bit about the Tokoyama?
Let's talk a lot about the Tokoyama.
Yeah, I've got a lot to talk about with this one.
I do too. And who knew?
Yeah.
Who knew that there would be this much to talk about?
Well,
there is.
I feel like I researched this. I don't know if it'll show, but I spent so much time on this and mainly just watching videos of them working. But there was a surprising amount of information that I was very fascinated with. So,
yeah, me too.
It is said that the job of a Tokoyama came into existence under a very famous kabuki actor. Okay, so kabuki actors, he's the first. His name is Tojuro Sakata. But in the kabuki world, they all have inherited names kind of like in sumo. Like once the role of Brad Pitt or Blad Pitt, what I was about to say, Blad Pitt, Vlad Pitt, whoever.
My favorite, Vlad Pitt, yeah.
The Russian version of Brad Pitt is Vlad Pitt.
Yeah.
No, but if Brad Pitt decided to retire, then the next hot, handsome guy that would come along to play his types of roles would assume the name Vlad Pitt or Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
So the very first version or very first guy who played or inherited the name Tojuro Sakata from this kabuki world is the guy who kind of got the Tokoyama elevated and into the world of theater. Now, this is back in the Jinroku era. That's 1688 to 1707. So
before the Edo period.
Yes, he led a new movement in the kabuki theater where they just elevated it. He's the one who coined this sort of specific hair job. Now, in kabuki theater, a Tokoyama became a title of somebody who styled kabuki wigs for theater, dance, Japanese dance, and much, much more. So,
and could you give me an idea of what a kabuki wig might look like?
There are different eras of hairstyles and stuff. If you start researching, there was so many eras where just long, straight, beautiful black hair was in fashion, was in vogue. But if you look at ukiyo-e prints, you'll see women have their hair all intricately put up with combs, and it's oiled with like camellia oil. That's a different era, right? But if you look at kabuki theater, the costumes and everything and the hair and the wig, nothing is modern day. So I don't know what years it's based on, but I imagine it stays true to the tradition of kabuki and a lot of other, things that have a lot of pageantry. They kind of are stuck in old times. So I don't know if I gave you an answer. I gave you not one that's right. I just gave you an answer.
Give me a walk around.
There are many different ones. And also, if you research kabuki, like they have a standard look for this role from this popular show. It's kind of like Swan Lake. Every Swan Lake, they typically kind of each each version, everyone who's the Black Swan kind of looks like the same Black Swan. That's, I think, the way it is in Kabuki theater. Whoever plays these legendary characters has hair and all of that looks the same, right? So this guy, being a mover and a shaker in the Kabuki world, was like, we got to employ somebody to keep these Kabuki actors looking sharp, looking tight with these wigs. We want them styled well. So he employed Tokoyamas.
Oh, he wasn't a Tokoyama.
No, he was an actor, and he was kind of elevating the Kabuki experience back in this Jinroku era.
Oh, so he was like, we don't look suave enough, guys. We got to bring in someone from the outside. Okay, got it.
He was
now.
the Andrew Lloyd Webber of I don't know, or Stephen Sondheim of, that's not even true. That would be like a Bob Mackie. Anyway, we're way
there
off.
We go. The Bob Mackie of the Kabuki
world. Theater world.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So here's how it came to be the standard hairstyle in sumo way back then and still today. Okay. The chonmage, is how it's pronounced, chonmage, is inspired by a samurai hairstyle of the 8th century, okay, to stabilize a very heavy kabuto, which is a battle helmet, okay? So way back in ye olde days, samurais would shave the crown of their heads into a nakazori style. And that basically meant they shaved the pate of their head, the crown of their head, and then
the very top is bald.
Yeah, and then they pulled the ponytail back over, and they folded it forward. And this was helpful to keep the very like if you saw like samurai helmets, they are of another world. They're beautiful, but they are funky and they're heavy. And you got to keep that helmet in place. And nothing is worse than riding into battle on a horse and you got a shaky helmet and it keeps falling down in your eyes. I mean,
you're like, I can't see anything.
Exactly. You would not be a very good samurai with like a big old helmet down over your eyes. Also, they did it to keep them like their heads cool. And here's another interesting reason. I saw this cited a couple of places. This covers up any sort of male pattern baldness. For the
what the hairstyle
if
does?
you shave the top of your head and everyone has a shaved top of their head, then no one really knows who's losing their hair. Am I right?
Oh, got it. Yeah. You could stay hidden in the crowd.
Exactly. No one will know that you're mostly bald on top. I guess maybe they cared about that back then.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Because everyone's doing it by choice.
Exactly. And so.
It's kind of like the trend of like young people turning their hair gray. If everybody did that, then going gray would not be a problem.
At like 26, then you're like, everybody's cool. And we've all got gray hair. Anyway, very, very creative. My personal take would be like, hey, y'all, maybe we have a design flaw with the helmet. Let's not all...
Exactly.
let's revisit the helmet.
Let's make better helmets.
But you know what? It wasn't an option. So they were like, you know what? Let's just fix everybody's hair into this funky hairstyle. This extreme hairstyle became a symbol, though, of the upper classes, and it was very widely respected because it was the hairstyle of a samurai. And in fact, in artwork, if someone was portrayed negatively, often the artist would draw that person with like scraggly hair. So a very styled and neat chonmage was a well-respected hairstyle. It meant class. It meant upper ruling class and power. That's kind of what it meant for at least men.
And the hairstyle was completely bald from not just the very top, but like from the front, completely bald, like only hair on the sides until you get to the back, right?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, for the most part.
Okay. Like a Kurosawa film samurai.
Yeah.
Right?
Like someone just took some razors down your bangs and just went back.
Right straight down the middle.
Yeah. So anyway, we all know sumo has been around since ancient times. And once upon a time, we've talked about this before, sumo was just kind of street brawls and on the corners with matches with villagers all wrestling each other. And apparently the ruling classes and the uppity people, they kind of scoffed at these displays of brutality and violence from the lower classes. So in Japan, they tried to outlaw sumo because they considered it lowly by many people in power, meaning the peasants and commoners would, like out in the countryside in their underwear, would be duking it out. And the upper classes, they did not like this undignified sport on display. But, the efforts to stop this gritty, side sumo in the streets was unsuccessful. So cut to the Edo period. Okay, everyone from the countryside was moving back into the metropolitan areas and cities, but they still had this kind of thirst for sumo. So the promoters of the era, they tried to take advantage of kind of a good situation. They figured, okay, look, people still need entertainment, yeah, and there's only so much kabuki you can watch here in the city.
That's right.
So let's give everyone some sumo in like a different package, and maybe it won't like ruffle any feathers of the higher up samurai class. And maybe, just maybe, along with the help of some like other people from the ruling classes who can sponsor and throw some cash towards this, we can dole out some new Yokozuna licenses. They can become patrons of popular wrestlers, and we're going to try to legitimize the sport and make it look more palatable and make some money, right? Well,
yeah, we're going to add some etiquette to this.
Right. And so this effort to dress up this traditionally violent sport of sumo worked. It eventually made it into the national sport of Japan with the help of, honest to God, a makeover. It's just like Queer Eye for the straight guy, but it's like Sumo Eye for everyone.
Yeah. And we're talking about the Jonathan Van Nesses of the world.
Of the sumo world,
today.
yeah. These promoters. And in cahoots with some people in this ruling samurai class. So what did they do, you ask? Okay, so they added the ritualistic religious aspects of the fights, like a temple-like ambiance, sometimes in actual temples. The Shinto religious aspects, the salt throwing to purify the doyo, power water, all these nice loincloths, like no more like naked people in the streets brawling in their undies or torn clothes.
Their fundoshis.
Yeah, they added the bowing, and they started to control and curate the wrestler's appearance before the public. And I imagine because those people had fans that were paying money to come see these people, and you make them look nice, they're going to show up. And they gave these upper ranked wrestlers specific hairstyles for the upper two levels, so that the highest ranking rikishi got the privilege of wearing this ginkgo leaf hairstyle called the oichomage, I believe. The upper two levels started to kind of reflect what the samurai class and everybody was starting to look like, right? People were like, hey, this is a legitimized sport. Okay, so the revolution of culture in the Edo period opened up a previously isolationist nation and legitimized the sport. It brought in a bunch of new fans. It appeased the upper classes now, and that's all by giving it a makeover, right? So with these newly regulated hairstyles for wrestlers, you had to have somebody who could actually style it, though. So you've probably, this is what I'm guessing, you probably found a guy from the kabuki world who was like, look, I know how to work wigs. Back in those days, there were no plastic wigs. They were all real hair. Who do you go find to like style the hair of all these wrestlers that have to look good for tournaments and as they're walking around town? And they went and they hired Tokoyamas.
Yeah, because you can't rely on a sumo wrestler to do his own hair and have it look really nice.
Although I've heard some can do their own, not the ginkgo leaf, but some like in a pinch. If they had to,
could do it.
They could. But yeah, if you wanted to look pro, you got to find a Tokoyama.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you bring them in from the theater world.
Right.
And that makes complete sense.
Yes. Well, I don't know if they came in. I mean, Tokoyama just means hairdresser. So anyone in the era who was just like out and about town, who was doing ladies' hair anyway, they could have brought in anybody who was doing hair. But I like to think that they went to the theater.
Okay. Got it. Because, well, that's what we would do.
But then in the Meiji era with the Emperor Meiji, he dismantled the samurai class and the feudal clans of Japan. He said, I'm paraphrasing, and I'm actually this is not even paraphrasing, I'm making this up. But he said, all y'all men are forbidden to wear your hair like that, okay? And you can't have samurai swords anymore. You have to go have Western hairstyles now, okay? And we have to step into this new modern world. We've been, old-fashioned and isolated for a long time, and these old-fashioned haircuts are not cutting it, okay?
He was a new ruler.
He was.
That came to power and said, we have got to modernize.
Yes, but he also dismantled the samurai class. I mean, that was his real thing, is he was like, we cannot have samurai, and here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to make sure that none of you can have samurai hair anymore, bitches. And so,
wow.
Yeah, but here's the kicker. He's like, none of you are allowed to have these hairstyles, but I do love sumo, so I will make an exception and allow it only in the sumo world, okay? But if you're a samurai, you cannot walk around with your chonmage, okay? No more shaving the top of your head. None of that top knot look, okay? That was done by imperial decree around 1871 to 1876, okay?
I find that fascinating.
Yeah, that they were like, no more. You cannot have this hairstyle. But it does make sense. There were gangs of samurai in my research I found, that went underground and kind of still tried to...
I will not get... That's like people being so proud of their mullets. They're like, I'm not letting you cut my mullet off.
Well, I'd like to think maybe they're more attached to like their profession or just being a samurai as opposed to their hair. But then again, I don't really know. I don't know. But anyway, so nobody was allowed to have it. So I found that fascinating. What I don't know is we can talk about what the old style looks like, but the sumo wrestlers, they don't shave their head anymore. They haven't done that in a long time. So I couldn't find in my research, although I didn't research too hard on that. I was like, when did sumo wrestlers stop shaving the pate at the top of their head?
They do.
They did.
They do sometimes.
Well, yes, but that's for different reasons. But if you look at old sumo wrestlers, old pictures, there are some that have their head shaved, I believe. Or
from the front.
From the front.
Yeah.
And
like that buzz cut. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And I don't know when they were like, no, this is just too much shaving. Let's just...
Yeah.
Anyway, hopefully...
Or maybe it went out of fashion or whatever the reason. Yeah.
Let's jump to a little bit, and you can hop in if you like, about modern day, okay? When a wrestler comes into the world of a stable, he comes in with this like regular people hair. And this style is officially called the Zenbara style, which is translated as loose and disheveled hair. And this is the kind...
That's me. That's what I have.
Yes, you have loose and disheveled hair as well as I do. Most all of us would be in this category of Zenbara style. And this is the style of hair before a wrestler's hair is long enough to put in a chonmage. Okay. Now, there are exceptions. These younger wrestlers who are not deemed experienced enough to be in the upper levels and have the official hairstyle, when you see wrestlers start sumo and they haven't ranked up, or they do make it to the top rank and they still can't put their hair in the chonmage style.
Yeah, because that happens sometimes. So it's kind of interesting. It's just not long enough. Yeah.
Right. But they're officially not allowed to wear the ginkgo leaf until they're in the upper two levels. There are exceptions to that, though. Like we were talking before, if a wrestler who's really young, who's like 18, has just got a ton of hair, and the Tokoyama is like, you've got lots of beautiful hair, but it is just too much for me to work with, they will still shave the pate. It's called nakazori, which is when a Tokoyama kind of shaves this may not make sense to anybody who's not Jewish. I'm not Jewish, but the yarmulke part of the head, if you put a yarmulke on your head, it's kind of like the top and the back-ish. It's kind of like not the front of the crown, kind of the back of the crown. And you wouldn't know this by looking at sumo wrestlers. A lot of the young ones have their head shaved under there. And that is because the hair is more manageable for the Tokoyama to work with. He's getting all kinds of wax and stuff in there, so he's got to have manageable hair. When you do see pictures of that, you're like, okay, that's kind of creepy, but
yeah,
if you just get out of the shower and you like see that, you're like, this is the worst style. I have long hair all around my bangs and all the back, and then I just have like this beanie-sized shave spot in the back of my head. It's like just, I would be hiding that from anyone.
But that is someone's pattern baldness. That is, naturally.
Somebody.
Yeah.
somebody. You can tell a lot of these wrestlers, they get their hair yanked and pulled all day, every day, it seems like. But some of them have receding hairlines for sure. But some of the young guys, you know, who have tons of hair, they probably a lot of them have that shaved. But it's so tied perfectly. You would never know. You would never know in all that wrestling that they've got a bald head under there or a lightly shaved head. Now, like I said, there are 2 divisions that can wear the fancy version of the chonmage. The oichomage, which top knot, which represents the ginkgo leaf, which I believe is a symbol of longevity in Japan.
Yeah.
And younger wrestlers who start sumo aren't allowed to wear that unless they need like a head that a Tokoyama in training can practice on. They're allowed to get it then. Sometimes if they are a Makushita wrestler and they're going to be sitting in for the day in a tournament with a Juryo wrestler, they're allowed to have the ginkgo leaf. Retirement ceremonies, there are official ceremonies that they're allowed to wear a fancy hairstyle, but most of the time you'll see it just laying flat. It's like looks like a little flat ponytail kind of facing forward. And that's what they get styled every day.
Yeah. Any Tokoyama that's working right now, and usually there's around 50, can't have more than 55 at a time, but all of them have a sort of ring name that starts with Toko.
Right. You would be Toko Lari and I would be Toko Leslie.
Right. Yeah. There's Toko Tsuru, Toko Yumi, Toko Hira, Toko Asa, Toko Naka, Toko Tatsu, Toko Yushi, Toko Jin.
Can you imagine how confusing that is at the Tochi stable? I mean, everyone's named Tochi no Shin, Tochi Ozan, Tochi this, and then there's Tokos everywhere.
Yeah. Everywhere. I mean, it makes the Chios seem like child play, doesn't it?
It does.
They all have extremely similar ring names to the American ear, anyway, but they're all employed by the JSA, and that's why they're in the calendar, because they are a part of the JSA. And just like sumo, there's a ranking system at play here. Normally, there's 2 special rank Tokoyama at the very, very top. And those are the only guys that are allowed to style a Yokozuna's hair. And then
unless it's like the stables, like Miyagano stable, like I saw a younger guy, like a 4th Circuit Tokoyama working on Hakuho's hair. But that's because he works at the stable. I think for official stuff, they must have to have the top guns.
Okay, got it. Maybe if you're just going to hang out at home, you could have your local barber do your hair.
Right.
But if you are going to an event, you can only get your hair done if you're a Yokozuna by the special rank Tokoyama.
And some stables even have more than one Tokoyama because some
because there's a lot of guys there.
Yeah, like one poor guy was like, each one of these takes about 5 minutes. The top knot ginkgo leaf one takes about 15 minutes. That's a lot of heads, and you gotta
it's a lot of hair.
That's a lot of hair. You gotta share, the workload with others.
Yeah. In order to get that special rank Tokoyama status, you have to have more than 45 years of service into the JSA.
What if you're not very good, though? You've just hung in there for 45 years.
Well, I think they assume that you're going to get good after 45 years at something. Doing hair every day for 45 years, you get those 10,000 hours in.
You do.
I imagine.
You do.
And you become really, really good at it. But the guys that are at the special top rank are all over the age of 60. They've been doing hair for a long, long time, okay? But the 1st through 5th classes, which are below this special mark, it all depends on years of service and how good your hairstyling is, right?
Right.
1st rank might be 30 years of service. That's somebody with excellent performance and it's put 30 years in, whereas a 2nd class might be 20 to 30 years of service, and a 3rd class would be 10 to 20 years of service, right?
Right.
And it just keeps going down to the 1st class, which are people who've had less than 5 years of service, and you have to start younger than 19.
Wow. I mean, I saw the videos, and it does look like a bunch of 15-year-olds in there, like learning how to do hair.
Yeah.
It's not.
And why not? I mean, if you are interested in sumo and you're maybe not a big enough kid to really go at it seriously, you could still be involved in sumo and work with sumo wrestlers every day and just do hair instead.
Well, and you also think about there's yobidashis and collars, there's gyojis that are all coming in at the same age. So it's interesting to think when you look at all these young kids that you're like, you assume they're all wrestlers to be, but they're not. A lot of them are just starting in the world of sumo in any number of areas.
Exactly. And just like sumo wrestling, in the hair world of today in JSA, it takes an apprentice 3 years before you can make a decent chanmage. And there's no explicit instructions on how to do it correctly. You have to develop your own style of hairdressing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, by watching and learning and developing your own methods.
It's a true Japanese craft. Like, people make swords, people make all kinds of things, pottery, and it is learned by observing for years upon years upon years. And I love that this is the same approach with hair.
So you could be a 15-year-old boy and you're like, I love sumo, but my parents are small and I just don't think I'm going to be a tall guy. So I want to do hair. And you would then go to the JSA, or maybe you go to a stable. I don't actually know how that part works, but you show up and you're like, I want to be a Tokoyama. Okay. The JSA would then give you a toolkit and say, you got to buy your own scissors, son, because they don't provide the scissors for some reason. I don't know why. And then they're like, okay, we're just going to throw you in and you're going to apprentice at X stable. They assign you a stable. What you do is you learn to section the hair. You apply water first because who knows what's in the hair. Sometimes it's sand. Sometimes it's, who knows, sweat, tears. I don't know. You apply water
if you're crying
and then you apply
upwards.
If you're upside down
True.
and you're exhausted and lots of sweat has gone
That's
into
true.
your head.
That's true. I did not
you
think
haven't
of
gotten in
that.
the shower yet. Yeah. So you do your water and then you apply oil and then you use a different set of combs to smooth out the hair and make sure every single strand of hair absorbs the oil. And this requires muscle. Before I watched the footage of guys getting their hair done, I thought, it looks so relaxing. Like I'd seen a Yokozuna get his hair done after a fight, right? Before he was going to go out and speak again or receive the trophy or something. And I thought that looks kind of calming. But it's really not. As soon as you start watching more videos, you're like, these guys are cranking on the hair of these wrestlers and they are not holding back. And some of these guys have curly hair and they're just pulling these combs through.
Yeah.
There's sand in their hair. It looks really intense to me. And I started to think maybe the reason all their eyes are closed is because they're just trying not to shout out in pain because that does not look comfortable to me.
Yeah, it definitely looks like hair getting yanked, but I have heard that some of them find it really relaxing. Considering the pain they withstand in the dojo, it might pale in comparison. It might be like as close to a massage as you can get.
It seems kind of like going to the dentist to me. There are some people who say they can go to the dentist and they find it very relaxing and they can go to sleep in the chair. I am not one of those people. I go to the dentist and I'm like holding on for dear life on the side of the chair unless I remind myself to relax. And that's what it reminds me of, watching some of these guys get their hair done by apprentice hairdressers who maybe aren't sure, haven't developed their style yet.
Yeah, but the pros,
are just figuring it out.
The old guys that, oh man, when you see them, how fast they are, and they all have to have really strong mouths. I know you'll probably get to that. But they have to pull and yank. They're using their hands, they're using their arms, their body weight, their mouth, and tying. And it looks like a sport in and of itself.
It really, really does. So what's in the toolbox? In order to tidy the hair, somebody who's doing hair is going to need 4 different kinds of wooden combs, and they're all handcrafted combs made by one family who have been making them for centuries. They'll have a stick in the toolkit that's used to style the look. They have some string made with wax paper, again, made by one family in Japan, that they're going to tie around the ponytail. And then to keep it in place, they've got this fragrant oil and wax that's called bintsuke. The twine that you're talking about is called motoyui. Motoyui. I am actually not quite sure how to say that. But it's got to be strong. It's about the thickness of a noodle, but it's got to be super, super strong so that it doesn't break during a sumo match. And in fact, I ran across several interviews where people were talking to Tokoyamas. These Tokoyamas were saying, when I watch sumo, the only thing I watch is the wrestler's head. I don't watch the bout. I just watch their head because it would be terrible if twine snapped off during a match.
Well, right.
It would just be horrendous.
Well, if your hair hits
if
the
that
ground,
happened.
it's a disqualification, not disqualification, but you can lose if your top knot hits the ground before the other guy. So,
Oh, that's right.
It's got to be tied, and it's got to be tied right. I mean, this could be a win or a loss on someone's hand if they get thrown
true.
and they're upside down. You know what I mean?
That's true. What I found interesting when I was looking up the tools in the toolkit of these guys is just how few families were making the tools anymore.
Well, I heard the
many of
brushes
them
are like
going out of business.
I had heard that the combs, though, that are used, they're like, this may be a source I need to recheck. But they were like, some combs have to come from bushes that are only 50 years old. And like other wooden combs have to come from trees that are 150 years old. They are handcrafted from like very old wood. And I imagine the families that have done that forever are the true craftsmen because they have to have different combs for getting out the sand. It has to be really fine, but it also has to do an incredible job of making it slick and smooth all the while working through that binsuke, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So it's the combs that are, they can only use certain kinds of woods for, but it's also like I spent a while looking at paper, the wax paper that's made for the ties. And because it only comes from kozo plant that's only grown in a certain region of Japan, is kind of famously coming from there. But the shop that it usually comes from has been closed down because of COVID. So the guy who makes the ties has nowhere to make them because you have to apply glue to paper. You have to dry it in the sun and you have to repeat that many, many times. And he's got no place to work.
Oh,
and
man, we need to start a new movement. We got to get these people back to work.
That and the bensuke people, the people that make bensuke, it's only in, one place. It smells a certain way. It only smells like chamomile or it only smells like vanilla. But that market has tanked because there's not as many sumo wrestlers. I mean, it's just like one thing after another, all these stories of these small business owners in Japan that make these very specific items that are slowly going out of business. Because sumo is dropping off. There's not as many people in the sumo world, or there's just no one to step up and take the craft on for themselves.
Right.
Let's jump to some modern Tokoyama and their personalities, okay? There's a lot written about a guy who retired in 2019 who was Hakuho's hairdresser. His name is Akira Kato. What's really fascinating about him is his relationship with Hakuho. He started doing hair at 13 at Hakuho's stable, took an immediate disliking to him, but stayed close to Hakuho as Hakuho rose in the ranks. And I think this story kind of tells you more about the purpose, not only of hairdressing as the Tokoyama, but also the jobs they have sort of helping to mold who these young men will be.
They spend so much time with them every day.
Exactly.
They have one-on-one time with each one of these wrestlers. It's a very important relationship, and they probably are their confidant in some ways, if they're talkative. It's an interesting position. They definitely would know all the gossip in the stable, for sure.
When Hakuho was in a foul mood, it was the hairdresser that would come in and deal with him. None of the other people at the stable could really handle him because he was kind of like top of the ladder, right? Everybody else is below him. And so they didn't really know what to do with him when he was in a foul mood. So they'd bring in the Tokoyama.
Like, just do his hair. Just make him shut up and do his hair.
Well, and he would sort of listen to Hakuho a little bit, and then he would teach him how to handle the situation gracefully, Like there's a story about, I guess, if you're in a tournament, there is this thing that goes on behind the scenes. If you're in a tournament, you've got people helping you,
Mhm.
and you share some of your winning money, the money that you win in your fights with your helpers, right? That's just nice. That's what you do. You share the wealth. Well, if you drop out of a tournament halfway, you should still share that money that you've won with your people below you. And I guess Hakuho was not doing that at some point.
Oh.
As he was Yokozuna, he would drop out halfway and he wouldn't share his winnings. So it was this guy, the Tokoyama, that basically came in and said, dude, you are going to be known as the stingiest man in the sumo world unless you start sharing your winnings. And he was the only guy that Hakuho listened to. And Hakuho changed that and started sharing his winnings a little more. There's a lot of stories like that in the sort of talk and tell literature that's out there about the Tokoyamas. But it is interesting because this guy says, even now, I don't like Hakuho, but he has become a good Yokozuna. So they're definitely
very straightforward
informal advisors.
Yes, and clearly not afraid of the
is.
man. So I love it.
Yeah, not afraid of the man. Yeah, so they're mentors.
I found it and then I could not find the source information, but there was another Tokoyama who had been doing hair for like 50 years. So he had experience with, he was just like, Asashori's like this, Haruma Fuji's like this, Chiyono Fuji's like this. He was like, Akebonu was like this. He had the inside take on every Yokozuna for like the last 50 years who he had styled. And so that's like incredible. It's really incredible.
And I'm sure, as they're working their craft, it's sort of easy to think that's an easy hairstyle to do. It's not a big deal. But as soon as you start watching these videos and you get these close-up views of these guys' heads, you start realizing that, some of them do have little bald spots in certain areas. Or like Hakuho's hairdresser said, Hakuho's hair is totally different from side to side. It's one way on one side, it's another way on the other side. I've got to balance it out. And probably there are all sorts of variations with people's hair that they're working with, like thickness, density, porosity, as well as the personalities of all of the people that they're working with. And they're trying to figure out how to balance that all on the top of their head.
Well, and they use their hands and they're all over the head and they're really in close, but then the mouth is also used to hold and tie. It's also called literally the third hand. And so they're using their whole mouth, hands, all at the same time in this kind of ritual type of movement that they have developed over all these years to tie beautiful top knots and quickly and with accuracy and with each nuance of each wrestler in consideration, when they're tying their hair. So it's crazy.
But I learned that even that top knot, where the front is oiled and is coming forward, I didn't realize that there was a modern push to that. I saw an article from one Tokoyama who said, everyone used to have the ponytail and the end would just go forward, straight forward. But now the younger guys are having the ponytail go just slightly off to one side at an angle. Oh. And so that's the modern take on the top knot, not the ginkgo leaf. The ginkgo leaf is different altogether. Yeah. And much harder to do, to make all that evenly spaced and make the ginkgo leaf stand up where it is. But I didn't realize that there was variety just in the top knot in and of itself.
So that is interesting.
So this took me, even like learning about Hakuho's hairdresser, I started to wonder, okay, so who's the top ranked guy out there right now? Since Hakuho's hairdresser retired, who's the top of the ladder now? And he's affiliated with Kakeru's stable, Kiribayama's stable. It's Michinoku Baya?
Yeah, Michinoku, yeah.
That's the stable. And his name is Mitsuo Nabeshima. That's his real name. His ring name, if you will, is Tokotsuru. And he was born in 1960. And what's great about looking up these Tokoyama now is you can go onto their websites, and just like they do with the sumo wrestlers, you can often see how tall they are, how much they weigh, what their favorite foods are, their blood type, things like that.
Maybe they have a fan club.
Who knows? They probably do. But this guy's favorite food is sushi. And he is the guy on the calendar, on the back page of the calendar. He's in the top upper left box of all the Tokoyama, that is the guy with special rank status right now. And as far as I know, the only guy with special rank status, which begs the question, if he's in Kakeru's old stable, where does he do Terunofuji's hair? Does he go to Terunofuji's stable, or does he just go to the Kokugikan to fix his hair? I don't know how all that works.
Well, they can be lent to other stables. They can sit in at other stables sometimes.
Yeah. But when do they go? Do they go early in the morning?
See,
do they
I don't
go
know.
like where does the hairdressing happen on like day of a tournament? Where is it happening and when? Those are the things that I would like to know.
Probably backstage somewhere. Because they come in with their hair styled probably from their own stable. But you know what? If these guys live at home and they go to the Kokugikan directly from home, then who does their hair first thing in the morning at residence, apartment 5A?
Exactly.
Or do they go to the stable first and then walk from the stable over to the tournament? Or they get driven?
Those are the burning questions. I think we're going to have to ask. We're going to have to ask a wrestler.
Well, the Yokozuna is allowed to park in a car down below, and we don't see him enter, do we? No.
We do.
We do.
Yeah.
His hair's done. I was like, wouldn't it be fabulous if they get out down there and then their hair's just a hot mess?
It would be fabulous.
They walk in.
I would love that. But no, it's done by the time they get there. So they're rarely, if ever, seen without these hairstyles done.
Wow. The calendar is extraordinary for many reasons. But when I opened it, and you opened it too, we got to this page where there's just all these pictures of these Tokoyamas, and we didn't know at the time. They just look like guys who aren't wrestlers in really bad fluorescent light up against a white wall. Wouldn't it be nice if they're going to be in the calendar? It's like they have a little pomade in their hair. They have a nice little soft backdrop. They have some nice lighting on them so that they don't just look like, who are these random guys in like white button-down shirts who look really serious at the back of this? I'd like to see them with a little bit more of a flair, for a calendar.
It is interesting because the Gyoji have flair. Mm-hmm. They have these beautiful Shinto priest outfits that they're wearing. Mm-hmm. The collars have a uniform. Mm-hmm. But not the hairdressers.
Yeah.
They don't have a lot of flair. It's just like this guy in a white button-down business shirt is what it looks like.
They all have short hair, but it's just, it doesn't look very styled or coiffed, or it just doesn't look like a person who does hair.
But you know what I noticed? There's very little gray hair. So even these guys who have been doing hair for over 45 years, there's very little gray hair in theirs.
Well, maybe they're dyeing it.
Maybe they're dyeing it. Maybe they're eating really well. I don't know. I just find it interesting. Now that I'm kind of looking up these guys and putting personalities with stables and like figuring all these pieces out.
Yeah.
I can like pick a person, look him up in the stable and go, oh, look, this guy, Taro Ohashi, he was born in 1970. Oh, he likes music appreciation. He likes going on walks, and his favorite food is ice. How interesting. Why would they put that on a stable website? But it makes sense
because for somebody who uses his jaw to like help in tying these tight, ponytails, ice might just be like what tastes great and feels great in the mouth,
It might be.
I have to remind myself, though, is that these guys aren't hairdressers. Like, I don't imagine you can't go to some guy who's been a Tokoyama for 50 years and been like, would you also mind giving me a perm or some like highlights or lowlights? He doesn't do that. He does two styles. And shaves their head.
I did wonder that.
And then
I wonder, because these guys, I don't think they're getting paid enough to only do this one thing.
No, I don't think they get paid more than like 40 grand a year. I don't think that's the top level. I don't think, they have their expenses paid for, but like.
So they could be a hairdresser on the side.
They might be, but when are they going to go to hairdresser school if you've been a Tokoyama your whole life? But
that really is a question.
Well, and I thought when Goedo got his hair done, cut and trimmed up in the back, he just got a slicked back look. And I was like, it doesn't look like a lot of texturing in there. So I don't know if these guys are whizzes with the scissors. They just know how to do the traditional sumo hairstyles. If you want a hairstyle, like Kisano Sato has like a really nice, coif, it's shaved in the back. I was like, oh yeah, these guys, they might be able to do a light trim, but like on anyone's short hair, like probably just does a buzz. He's like, I
don't
can't do
know.
bangs or layers.
But who knows? Maybe they are traditionally trained barbers as well. I didn't see anything on this,
I don't
so
know.
I don't know.
Well, that is something we don't know. Do they also get basic barbering skills?
From the websites that I've looked at, and I've been reading about these modern day Tokoyamas, no one says anything like, I love doing hair. Hair makes me happy. They don't say things
not
like
an
that. They say
expression.
things like, here's a few more quotes that are from websites from Tokoyamas. They'll say things like, I started because I wanted to be a sumo wrestler, but when I saw that I wasn't tall enough and practiced, I thought it would be impossible for me, so I gave it up and became a Tokoyama.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
I hope he likes what he does.
This guy says, my my hobby is I'll stit a chonmage.
Oh, so he just, in his hobby times, like I embroider, I just like to do this hairstyle for fun.
Yeah, I just like to do this
Which
hairstyle.
is coincidentally the same thing I do for not fun, like for work. Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is really interesting. Not a lot of personality comes through, but like just enough to make you go, "Oh, this guy
he likes ice,
chicken. This guy likes chicken."
And they don't really photograph well, at least for the calendar. But I am just going to put it out there. Let's try to give them a little bit more pizzazz, considering their very important position in the JSA.
Yeah,
but I loved
yet again. I mean, things that come through translation often come through strangely in a way that doesn't always make sense.
Oh, like Tochiozan in his acceptance press interview after he retired. It was translated as he had jerky tears.
Jerky tears.
I was like, oh, I think that means tear. It was a real tear jerker for him, but it came through as Tochiozan had jerky tears.
Or this one, I ran across Mitakeumi's motto on his stable's website, and his motto is, I wonder if it's the ears of rice that hang their heads enough to bear fruit.
Well, maybe he should.
I have no idea what that means.
Maybe he should ask his general wife what that means. Anyway, I did enjoy researching this, though. It is a rabbit hole that, like, I still feel like I could go back in and do so much more research on. It's quite fascinating.
It is. And I think there might be a part 2 to this because of questions that we've received about the haircutting ceremony.
Yeah.
So next week, we might have a little bit more to say about the retirement ceremonies, the haircutting ceremonies. But remember, you guys, to look for that sexy Rikishi poll that's going to come out this week, and a special Valentine's Day episode with your winners and hopefully some love poetry or some haikus or something like that about your favorite sexy Rikishi.
Yeah, please submit that. You can submit it via direct message, email, call us.
Phone call, whatever you like.
Yeah, call us. And you can find all that information on our website, sumokaboom.com. And hit us up with your love poetry and stuff. We want to hear it. Love songs. We want to hear it. All right. Until next week, I'm Leslie.
And I'm Laurie. See y'all later.
Sayonara.